Hey, Seth David here from the world famous Nerd Enterprises Incorporated, and in this edition of Nerd's Guide to the Galaxy, we're talking about the power of QuickBooks Online Advanced and its ecosystem for mid-market companies. Now, QuickBooks Online Advanced is a product, as the name suggests, that is more advanced. It's targeted at companies that need to scale mid-market companies, as I mentioned in the title. So, when QuickBooks Online first came out, many years ago, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, it was a very simple cloud-based accounting product, and I believe it was the only one at the time. I don't think there were any other cloud accounting products out there when QBO first came out. Over the years, it's evolved, obviously, quite a bit, and now you have different versions of QuickBooks Online. There's Essentials and Plus and Simple Start, and there's a bunch of them. And QuickBooks Online Advanced came out to address the companies with more sophisticated needs, quite frankly. Now, when I think of mid-market companies, and I think of the accounting world that I work in and serve, I think about the nature of the services evolving, right? At this point, you're not necessarily dealing with companies that are likely going to need you to do their bookkeeping for them. It's likely more about the advisory services, the coveted advisory services that we've been talking about for so many years. Okay, I need to do advisory services. How do I do it? What does that look like? Well, this video should give you some very concrete ideas about what that looks like. Specifically, and more in particular, how QuickBooks Online Advanced can help. So we're going to talk about a couple of use cases, the reason being that the use cases help illustrate things very specifically, but I want to stress right at the top that as I'm going through this, and I'll point out the things that I want you to pay attention to, that I want you to be thinking way beyond the use cases that I'm talking about and what all the other possibilities are, so to speak. And again, it's sort of esoteric now, but I'll point out the things that I'm talking about along the way, where you can go, where you want to go, in order to think way beyond what I'm talking about specifically here and well into the realm of what else can I do? That's what I want you to do as you're watching this video. I want you to think, what else can I do? How else can I serve clients with these kinds of tools, right? And that's what they are. They're tools. So we're going to learn how to use them, which is how we put virtual or digital tools in our toolbox, is simply by learning how to use them and having access to them. And then we get to take those tools out and use them. And as I always say, it's the right tool for the right job. So we get to figure out when we need these tools and who they might be useful for. So the first use case has to do with a very specific experience I had not that long ago, maybe 5 years ago, maybe a little less. I had a client. I was providing CFO services, which is definitely advisory in nature. And we had gotten to the point, we'd been working together for many years, and things were cleaned up. The accounting was solid, and it came to a point where I was in a meeting with the client, and he said to me very specifically, like, okay, Seth, now, between now and our next meeting, you tell me what you can do to help us continue to improve. We had good systems. Everything was running well. So I said, okay. And I thought about it, and I said, what's the lowest hanging fruit? What are the most obvious levers we can pull to improve cash flow, right? Now, why did I go there? Why cash flow? Because if you're getting into advisory services, which means your job is to help this company grow and improve, the most significant way you can help them do that is by improving cash flow, and more specifically, cash flow from operations. Now, the easiest lever you can pull there is looking at your accounts receivable turnover. Assuming there are receivables, then we can look at that and see, are we collecting the money as fast as we could or should be? And with this client of mine years ago, and this was before QuickBooks Online Advanced, I looked at their AR aging, and I noticed that it was the same customers over and over again who were in the over 90-day category. And when I asked their bookkeeper about it, she said, yeah, this is normal. They always take forever to pay. And I say, great, let's tighten things up. And we built a process for managing the receivables collections a little bit more closely. And I said, the first thing we should do is we should write a letter, which is really going to be an email that goes out at each stage. So one that goes out with the initial invoice, of course, and then one that goes out after 30 days, then 60, then 90. And with each successive letter, we're going to turn up the heat, right? We're going to raise the temperature, and the 90-day letter is essentially like a shutoff notice that you would get from the utility company if you hadn't paid your electric bill, right? It's basically saying, look, we've sent you notices, we haven't heard from you. If we do not hear back from you in another, let's call it 5 business days, which gives them, in typical scenario, a calendar week, if we don't hear from you in this time frame, we're going to stop services. that usually gets people's attention, right? So we implemented this process, but it was a fair bit manual. We had to run the aging report. We had to put it into Excel so she could make comments and track what follow-up she had done and with whom and when and so on. It was messy. So enter QuickBooks Online Advanced, and this is the first thing I want to talk to you about that can substantially automate this whole process for you is QuickBooks Online Advanced workflows, right, or automations. That's what these workflows are. They are workflows that help you automate things. And in QuickBooks Online, with respect to the collections process, for sure, we have the data, we have the information right there at our fingertips. It's silly for us to be doing manual kind of follow-up like this. So let's go to my screen, and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. We're going to go to the gear icon, and of course you have to be in QuickBooks Online Advanced, so before you all come commenting and saying, I don't have this feature, it's because you don't have QuickBooks Online Advanced. So in the gear icon, under Tools, we go to Manage Workflows. And here's one of those points I want to stop on, and just stop for a second with the subject at hand and point out that you need to go through this area and think of all the possibilities. Look through every single one of these and ask yourself, what in my firm or in my client's business can I use here to automate things? Anything that you can do, and this is a universal truth as far as I'm concerned, anything that you can do to buy back time is top priority, no matter what. Should be above priority over everything else, okay? And all of these things. And so these are templates for workflows that you can use to create these automations, to automate processes and buy back time. So let's go to my workflows. And here I've got the, I've already set it up for two of them, right? The 90-day letter and the 60-day letter. So I don't have the 30-day letter. Let's go in and just look at one of these so you can see how it's done. So if I go to Edit, basically I named it. Okay, and we're going to come back and talk about how I named it and why specifically I named it that way in a second. But first, I'm going to click the drop down. So here we have send the reminder. The context, how many days? 91 days after the invoice date. If I click this drop down, there are other things we could use for the time frame, right? It could be after it's sent. So even though the invoice date is today, we may not send it till a week from now. You know, so you get the idea. Okay. Then down here, I checked off. We're going to send the customer an email. And over here, basically, this is an example of how we've turned up the heat. Notice these shaded regions. These are like merge tags. It's pulling information from the QuickBooks data, so you certainly would not want to get rid of this. And notice here, it says, by now we've sent 2 previous notices on top of the original email, and we still have not received payment. If we do not hear from you within the next 5 business days, we'll assume you are no longer interested in our services. Accordingly, we'll stop services and begin to pursue collection efforts. Thanks. You know, I would put Seth David, CFO, for whatever, right? And that hopefully gets the client's attention, right? So the 60-day letter, I'm going to discard any changes. The 60-day letter is a little less strong. It's more like, hey, we've sent you 1 notice previously. We'd really like to hear from you to find out, A, do you have any questions? Is there something wrong? You know, that kind of thing. The original 30-day letter was basically, hey, you might have missed this. It might have slipped through the cracks. Please let us know what's going on, or if you've scheduled a payment, so on. So that's the basic gist of this. Now, the naming is important because as you're looking at this, it's a small list right now. But you can imagine if I really start taking advantage of this, and I should, then this list is going to grow. So you really want to think about how you name things so that all these collections letters that are related will come together in the list, right? It also helps me chisel it down. I know that all collections letters start with the word collections. So these are little details that are important to think about as you're starting to use these kind of workflows and organizing them. Let's keep it super organized. The whole idea is organized, categorized, and easily referenced, right? You want to be able to easily reference the information so that if you decide there's something that you feel like you need to add to the letter or change, it takes you less than 10 seconds to find it and get in there and start making your edits. So this is how you almost completely automate the collections process. There's one other piece to this, which of course is when something gets to beyond 90 days, you've sent out your letter, you've given them the week, and now they still haven't responded. Now what? Well, that's where we tap the ecosystem that works with QuickBooks Online. And in this case, for this use case, I'm going to call on Collbox, right? And I'm going to have a lot of information on this screen blurred out because this is from my actual firm books. And a lot of these are sort of clerical in nature that I just need to clean up. They're not actual people who are late. But nonetheless, I'm going to use these as an example. So if I click on this particular client it takes me into a screen where it gives me the list of all the invoices. And you'll see here at the right where it says See Recovery Options. So if I wanted to send this customer to collections, I choose See Recovery Options, and then it gives me a choice. And this choice is essentially based on temperature, right? On the left, they give you an assist. It's actually a monthly subscription service that you can pay for, and they will help you do friendly phone calls and emails and follow-ups. The idea here is I want to keep the client, but I need to do something to make collection efforts. On the right, we have Collect, which they even warn you, not ideal for retaining customers. Like, this is where they're going to get aggressive. They're going to go for the jugular, okay? And there's also legal reasons why this is not for judgments. That is something else. That's a different kind of collection. So you can't use this to collect on a judgment. You can only use this to collect on an actual receivable. And when you click this, which I won't because I don't want to actually initiate this, it will take you into where you can you answer some questions and clarify, is this an individual customer that I'm collecting from, or is it a business? Those are important distinctions because that will determine who you get matched up with. So Collbox doesn't actually do the collections. They kind of match you up with collections agencies that will help you do it. And it works really well. And once you have gone through the process and sent something to collections, there's a little area where you can send messages and they'll respond and so on and so forth. So it really makes it easy so that completes the sort of collections process that we need to automate. And again, it's substantially automated at this point. Once you get Collbox all set up, the only part that's not going to be automated and never could be is the part where you go in and proactively choose whether or not to send somebody to collections, right? So you would never want to automate that and automatically send them to collections at like 96 days or something. That I can only see that creating problems, right? So you're never going to 100% automate this, but this is as close as you're going to get, and it's a really good close as you're going to get, okay? So that's the automations process and the collections process, and how right there you can see there's tremendous value. Now going back to that client of mine, while our process was a bit manual, it made a huge difference in their cash flow. We actually rectified a lot of problems. They had outdated billing contact information, which as a result of these notices they started sending out, they got responses and said, hey, please update your records. This is who the invoices need to go to from now on. And so we cleaned up the outstanding receivables as of that time, and they stayed clean. Very rarely did anything get to 90 days old because we had a process in place that was a routine. Like I said, it wasn't automated. If I still had them as a client and I could do this with them, I would encourage them to upgrade, because upgrading to QuickBooks Online Advanced for this alone would have probably been worth it for them because they had big receivables, mind you. So that's the collections process. It's one example of using the workflows in QuickBooks Online and then the ecosystem vis-a-vis an app like Collbox to, like I said, dramatically automate the receivables and collections process. So let's look at another thing. I want to talk about reports. This is my favorite, hands down my favorite feature of QuickBooks Online Advanced. If I go into reports here and then reports again, you'll see this is the normal standard report area that you see in any QuickBooks Online company. But now let's go to custom reports. You'll see it's blank. And you'll notice whether I'm in standard or custom or any of these. Actually, I go here and it changes. And Spreadsheet Sync is new. That'll be another video on another day. But either of these first two tabs, my top portion remains the same, where I can click here that says Create a New Report. This is specifically for the custom reports area. Now, within here, I want to focus on sales, because going back to what I said in the beginning, I talked about, improving, optimizing the client's cash flow. And that, generally speaking, means improving cash flows from operations. And what that usually means is, of course, increasing revenues while controlling expenses as best you can, right? So I want to focus on sales because this is where I feel like I can provide the most value to my client. So we're going to go in here. And I have a sample set of data in here. By default, it brings me into a view for last month. And you can see I've got a couple of invoices in here. But we're going to update this to this year. Let's do this year to date. Okay. And now I get a basic list, right? Doesn't look too exciting yet. But I've got a basic list of the invoices. And as you just saw, when I clicked on one of the pieces of information, it drilled me into the invoice. Okay. But backing out of there, we're going to talk about a few different things. We're going to look at the pivot table and grouping, and then we'll touch on filtering and definitely look at customizing. Now, I want to share something with you here that's really important. Years ago, I actually was on a call with some of the people who worked on the QuickBooks Online product, and specifically the reporting area. This was before QuickBooks Online Advanced. And they were asking me what features I felt would really improve the reporting area of QuickBooks Online. And, we had a lengthy discussion, and I had a lot of suggestions. But one of the things I said very high level at that time was that I felt, this is my opinion, that whichever cloud accounting product was the first one to come up with something that at least mimicked, if not exactly reflected, pivot tables and how they work, that's who would win in the cloud accounting world as far as I was concerned. Why? Because reporting is the most important thing, especially when we talk about mid-market. Like I said at the beginning, they probably have their own full-time bookkeeper, might even have their own controller, but what they may be looking to outsource is that CFO level touch. They may even have their own CFO, but that CFO is likely up to his or her eyeballs in doing a lot of their sort of compliance level work that they have to do, especially if it's a big mid-market company. So they still might want to outsource some, consulting work to, another accountant, such as yourself, to help supplement some of the stuff the actual CFO doesn't have time for, right? That's where this kind of stuff comes in that I want to show you. So that was my comment to them. And now, as you can see, they do have a pivot table feature. I'll demonstrate it for you a little later. I want to go to the group part first, okay? Now, what the grouping does is, as it suggests, it lets you group things. And notice right away, before I even click on anything, there's an add button here, which means I can add multiple grouping levels. This is not something you can do in any other cloud accounting product that I'm aware of, right? So I'm going to choose, I want to group first by product or service. Okay, and right away it gets a little useful, but this isn't anything I couldn't do already, in the main reporting area. But still, let's expand these, just kind of get a look. So I've got the basic information. Pretty cool already, right? But again, I can get a report very close to this without needing QuickBooks Online Advanced reporting. So let's add a level. Now let's say that within that I want to see the customer name. Okay. And then I'll close this. You'll notice as I make updates to the report that it kind of zips everything back up. So just be aware of that, that every time you make changes, you'll have to, if it's important to see the expanded view, you'll have to sort of redo that each time. Okay? And so I'm going to do that. And then we're going to take a look at what we've got here. Now, already this is pretty useful data. You could not do this. You can't get a second grouping level in any other QuickBooks Online product reporting area, and to my knowledge, you couldn't do this in any other cloud accounting product either. So already this is a lot more useful than what you would have access to anywhere else. Now, why is this useful? Let's talk about this specifically through the lens of the person providing CFO services to a client, and going back to the issue I raised of trying to optimize cash flow from operations for a client. There's 3 ways to improve sales, right? One way is to increase prices. Good luck doing that in most economies that we experience these days. The second way is to get more clients, which of course you should be doing that, but that's going to probably require some marketing dollars or time or whatever. The third way, the way that's probably most often overlooked, too often overlooked, is to increase the number of times a customer buys from you. Okay, so let's take a look at this report, and let's talk about how we can use this to that end. So what I can see right here very quickly, and it might even be easier to look at this zipped up, although it's nice to see the actual transaction data, is I can see that under accounting services, these are the clients that I have in those services, right? And extra points for anybody who recognizes these names. Some of them are pretty obvious. Some of them may be less obvious. Now, if you look here, I've got Tony Stark and Bruce Wayne under asset management. These are asset management clients. They both have a lot of money, and we're managing that for them. But what I might notice is, hey, we're doing asset management for them, but we're not doing their accounting services. Maybe that's something we should be talking to them about. Okay. Then down here we have farm accounting. Obviously, that's not going to be applicable to anybody who doesn't have a farm. So there we might be a little bit limited in terms of what we can do as far as getting other clients in that area. Then again, maybe Clark Kent, knows some other farmers in the area that he could refer to us, right? So even there's something that we could think about. But really what we're looking to do is cross-sell our services. And we're not just looking at, who hired us for accounting services. We're looking at who hasn't hired us for accounting services, such as Tony and Bruce. So now I can turn it over to our marketing department and say, hey, I need a series of marketing emails to go out to the following client list. these are people in our asset management area that could be signed on for accounting services. It makes sense for us to do all of it as long as there's no conflict of interest. So let's have at it. Go start sending them an email campaign, and let's see if we can get some calls scheduled with these guys so we can talk about, adding on some services, right? This is the best way. It usually represents the lowest hanging fruit as far as, easy ways to increase revenues in the best way possible, because in this way, not only are you increasing revenues, you're increasing the service you're delivering to your existing client base, which generally makes clients happy. They're not mad that they're paying you more money. They're excited that they're getting stuff from you that they weren't getting from you before, and maybe they didn't realize they could, right? So, and most people, I think, would prefer to have more of their accounting services, in one place where possible, right? So this is where you can use this kind of reporting, and just zooming out a bit, to get a scope on this. The idea, again, is we're looking at the different products and services that we sell and who we've sold them to, specifically to see whom we haven't sold these services to that are in other areas, so we can start cross-selling, right? Years ago, I got hired by a company to customize some reports for them for this exact purpose, but I didn't have QuickBooks Online Advanced, and I didn't have this, so it required a lot of work to get reports out of, this was QuickBooks Desktop actually, out of Desktop and into spreadsheets to run pivot tables to get this kind of data. Right, so the grouping feature is hugely powerful, and that's why I kind of wanted to jump on it first and show you and illustrate for you exactly how and where this can be used to provide incredible value to your clients, right? And really, again, this is what it looks like when you start moving into advisory services, is doing the analysis. Of course, books need to be cleaned up first so that you can rely on the data that you're looking at, and it sure is nice to be able to stick with within the accounting product without having to go to some other app. Although we're going to talk about the ecosystem on this subject too, and we're going to talk about an app that I think is going to, enhance this that much more in cases where you need it to, right? So we've got this, but this is also still, by the way, data that isn't necessarily the sexiest as far as clients are concerned. Clients like to see something a little more visual, especially if they're not accounting or finance people themselves. So let's look at charts. Up here, you'll notice View As. We've got the table view. Let's jump over to the chart view. You'll notice 3 chart types. Let's go to the stacked bar. Okay, let's change the x-axis here to the product or service. Okay, we'll stick with the amount for the y-axis. Down here, let's go split by customer name. Okay, so this is kind of a cool view that shows me the breakdown of the different services. Obviously, most of our revenue comes from asset management by a long shot, right? And that would make sense. I would expect to see that. Farm accounting is the least. And here we've got the mix of the accounting services stuff. If I hover my mouse over it, you can start to see, right? Now, the biggest client in this is Natasha, right? We're getting $2,000 from her for this time period, this year to date. Although these are actually just from the last month, if you noticed in the data. So either way, context is important. Make sure you understand what you're looking at and how to read it, because that's going to be important to inform you in terms of how to interpret it and explain it to your client. But let's say, because of just the scale of comparing these other 2 services against asset management, we want to be able to drill down and look a little more closely at this. That's where the filters can come in, okay? So let's filter by product or service, and we're just going to exclude asset management. So not equals asset management. Okay, and boom. Now we get just a little bit of a closer look. And again, if I hover my mouse over, everything's the same. Colors have changed. Natasha's color is now light blue. But bottom line, and you can see the legend going across the top, so you can see who's who. Okay, and so this is just more visual. Now, how do you get this out into a format that you can send to the client? There's no export here. If you notice, when we were on the table view, which we'll go back to in a minute, there's an export feature. There's not an export feature for this. The first thing you might do is hit Control-P or Command-P if you're on a Mac, and print this to a PDF. It's hit or miss sometimes in terms of how this comes out and how good it looks. Right? Let's go Portrait. Right, and it looks like it's going to be cut off and not be a great result. So the other way is, what I would actually do anyway, is I have Snagit that I use. Just take a screenshot of this and drop it in an email and send it to a client, and say, hey, let's schedule a call so we can review this. I have some suggestions based on this data, right? And of course, before doing that, we might want to remove the filter. so that when we send it to the client, it's got everything. Okay, assuming this was a client's data and not our own firm. So that's what charts look like, and you should play around with this, right? So if you're watching this video and you've gotten this far and you haven't paused the video yet, pause the video. You should have paused it by now, because really the best way to learn what I'm showing you is to pause me, right? And then go open it up yourself, get into a QuickBooks Online Advanced company, and recreate what I'm doing with your own data, or just load in some sample data. It's worth spending the money, by the way, for a subscription so that you can learn this tool, because the more you can learn this tool, the more confident you'll be when you're talking to your clients and encouraging them to upgrade, because you'll have a very clear picture in your mind about what you can do with this tool as you're talking to them about it. So there's no better way to be prepared. There's no better way to sell a service like advisory services than by learning how to use the tools that are going to enable you to provide those services, so you can have that picture in your mind's eye of these graphs and things you can do for them that you can't do in QuickBooks Online Plus or anywhere else for that matter, right? So it's worth it. Invest the money in yourself, in your own business. Now let's jump back to the table view. Okay. And notice the pivot table here. Okay, so let's try this. Customer name. For the rows, for the columns, let's start with transaction date by month. Values would be amount. All right, so you have to select your criteria before you can show the pivot table. And over here, note we're showing the totals, right? And we're showing the totals. That's for the rows and for the columns. I'll X this out. And now I've got my pivot table. So this is kind of useful. It's interesting to see the sales by month, but let's go back to the model of trying to understand a picture of who's buying what and who we can sort of cross-sell. So instead for this, let's do product or service. Instead of the timeline, let's do customer. Okay. And right away here, we've got accounting services, asset management, farm accounting. Okay. And this is cool, but let's flip this. So let's change this to customer name. And we may need to clear it first. Yeah, now we go customer name. And this is going to be product or service. And then, of course, value. And so this makes it a little easier to see. And again, this is what it means to pivot. I literally pivoted from what was previously in the rows versus the columns to what is now in the rows versus columns. And this is a little easier to see. And again, what I'm looking for is who's got asset management that doesn't have accounting. Now, again, this is a fairly simple data set, so it's not like, mind-blowing, like, oh my God, look at that. But the point is, if you had a lot more customers and a lot more services, this starts to get incredibly useful as a financial accounting analysis tool, which you will use to then talk to your marketing department, right? That's the whole name of the game here, is let's get the data we need to go to marketing and tell them what they need to do based on the data that we have. That is where you tie everything in, and where the value of the accounting services really skyrockets when you can start to do stuff like this. Okay, so the pivot tables are still fairly simple. We only get rows and columns. We can't do multiples, so that's where the grouping comes in. It's exclusive for now. You can only kind of do one or the other, but give it time, because like I said at the beginning of this video, this already has evolved so much since its inception. So I'm only imagining it's going to keep getting better and better and better as time goes on. So the trick is get in here, start fiddling with it now, so that you get really used to it. And this way, you're just kind of pinging it constantly, saying, all right, new features, new features. They roll out new features in QuickBooks Online products pretty frequently. So it's likely that you will see changes and updates rolling out sooner rather than later on stuff like this. Now let's talk about the ecosystem. So here, the ecosystem, comes back to the reporting, the dashboard and KPI type tools, key performance indicator type tools. I've seen a lot of these over the years. I've never fallen in love with any of them, to be very honest with you. And as I was using this one tool for forecasting that was very, very powerful and robust and sophisticated, even that I eventually found lacking, in that I wanted to go back to my process in spreadsheets because of this app that I found that I'm going to share with you in a minute. And especially because as robust and sophisticated as this tool was, there was a huge learning curve, and it was very clunky in terms of how to get certain things done, things that I can do in a spreadsheet with my eyes closed in less than 10 minutes. So at the end of the day, I said, why this the one major thing that the tool I was using helped me with was that it pulled the QBO live data right in, so I could easily compare that with my forecasted amounts and get variance analysis. Well, enter Genius Sheets, and now I can do this with a spreadsheet, and then I have all the flexibility of a spreadsheet. Now, I told you what I said about pivot tables earlier, and reporting. As far as I'm concerned, pivot tables are the most sophisticated, the best tool out there that one can use. And with just a little bit of basic spreadsheet skills, and you should have them, they're not hard to come by, you can do this kind of stuff. You can pull live data from QBO into a spreadsheet, and now you have all the tools that are available in a spreadsheet. That any KPI or dashboard tool I've ever used is limited at best in that you have to rely a little bit on what they decided was important as far as what you can do, what you can have access to, how you can format things here. I have 100% complete flexibility. I'm able to, as you can see, format these numbers according to my own company's branding, my blue and my green. I use the hex code, right? This is other stuff, by the way, that you can learn. So I go into my custom colors here, and I paste it in the hex code for the color blue that's in my logo, and same with the green. So what are we talking about? We're talking about Genius Sheets. And what Genius Sheets does is it allows me to cross-reference the name of an account and a date, and it pulls that data in live from QBO. Now, you can see already, just from understanding that much, how powerful that is in terms of pulling in live data and comparing it to my projected amounts for the accounts to get the variance analysis. I'm not going to show you that here. That would be a whole nother 1-hour video I'd have to go into. What I'm going to show you here is another really useful use case for this, where let's say I wanted to pull in my client data, and again, I'm going to emphasize having just a little bit of basic spreadsheet skills. If I click on this first date, you'll see that the formula in there says equals today, open and close parentheses, minus 30. That first part just pulls today's date off of your computer's clock, right? It says, give me today's date, and then it subtracts 30 days. And then every other date thereafter simply adds 1 to that. So what this does is it gives me a rolling 30-day timeline. So anytime I look at this, I'm looking at it over the past 30 days. So it's going to cross-reference that date with these accounts that I've listed out of the chart of accounts, and it's going to pull in these numbers. Now, if I go in and make a change that impacts the bank balance right now, it's going to take, from what I understand from my friends at Genius Sheets, up to 30 minutes before that update reflects, right? So bottom line, as long as I do this and think of it as a daily process, I'll come in once a day. You'll see when you first open up the spreadsheet, it's going to load all the numbers because it's refreshing them. But it's going to give me real-time data directly out of QBO. Now, what am I doing here? Well, I'm analyzing cash and I'm analyzing sales. And I want to look at relationships between cash and sales, and I want to set what is my comfort level? At what level am I comfortable? Do I feel like I have enough cash? At what level of sales am I comfortable? Do I feel like I have enough sales that when it translates to cash, I'm still going to be okay, right? These are two important analyses. So you talk about all these fancy ratios that you can analyze in all these KPI tools. None of them really address these two key numbers, which is what are my sales over the last 30 days and what's my cash balance, right? That's what I want to know. So for each of these, I set a threshold. I want my cash threshold. I want to have at least $100,000 in the bank at all times to know that that means that's a number that theoretically represents having enough to pay payroll and all the bills and everything. Like at this level, I know I don't have to worry about anything. And then down below, I have a daily sales threshold established of $5,000. I want to do at least $5,000 a day. Okay, and the way I've set these up is in the first month, you just key the number and all the others are set equal. And then down below, I have two charts which will update in real time anytime an update happens to this data. Just to prove my point, so you know there's no tricks up my sleeve, if I change the net sales threshold to 7,500, or sorry, let's do it to cash because we're looking at the cash chart here. Let's say I make this 50,000. Let's say I decide I don't really need 100,000. Instantly, you saw how the chart updated down below. Let's put it back to 100. So that's how this works. And then I've got the conditional formatting that I can get in a spreadsheet, which is also very easy to do. Again, you can watch probably one of my videos that are out there and learn how to do that very quickly. And then as I scroll out to the right here, you can see my sales threshold. So this one, we're a little all over the place. And then I look at this and I say, whoa, looks like we really did something right here. What happened on April 30th? I would look at this and I would reach out to my client and say, hey, client, what did we do here? Because whatever we did, it worked, and we need to do this like every day if we can, right? Now, a lot of times it's going to be some marketing campaign that wouldn't be practical to do every day, but the point is, this is how you start to, you analyze trends, right? This is a much easier thing to look at than just a wall of numbers. I can analyze these trends and start asking those questions to drill down. That's what a dashboard should do. It should show you, and this is based on, you can see from the title, this very concept, like a car's dashboard. How much gas is in the tank and how fast am I going, right? Cash is your gas in the tank. How fast you're going is your sales, right? How are we doing in sales? So that's what this is meant to represent. It's meant to be a dashboard that you build based on the concept of your car's dashboard, and you want very high-level information that you can glance at very quickly and then decide if you need to look more closely at something, right? Because when you're driving, you can't really take your eyes off the road, but you need to be able to see enough to know, do I need to like get off at the next exit and find a gas station, right? Same concept here. It needs to be simple enough to be just enough to clue me in when something needs my attention, not so complicated that it forces me to take my eyes off the road for too long. And that's what we've accomplished here. That's what I'm doing. So Genius Sheets is kind of like my ecosystem solution for the reporting aspect. And what you have access to in QuickBooks Online Advanced Reporting, as you've just seen, is very powerful. It's very useful. It's based on exactly what you need. If your goal is to kind of kick things up a notch and move on from just doing bookkeeping and compliance work to providing advisory services to clients, these are the tools you need. These are the tools that need to be in that toolbox in order for you to provide those kind of services where you're really adding value for your clients by improving cash flow. I've just given you two scenarios that can help you dramatically improve a client's cash flow by giving you data that you can use to take a closer look and figuring out and start figuring out exactly where to go and how to do that. That, my friends, is the power of QuickBooks Online Advanced and its ecosystem for mid-market companies. You can probably use this even for smaller than mid-market companies, the ones that are kind of on their way towards becoming mid-market. So don't rule it out. Check it out, see what you can do, learn everything you can. Look around what I've shown you. Like I said, there's lots of other areas you can dig into here. I can't show you everything in a short video like this, and it's not even a short video. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. As always, I hope you learned something here. I hope you had some fun along the way. I hope you're having an absolutely fantastic day, and I look forward to seeing you in the galaxy.